Viewpoints podcast brought to you by Equiture, the leading provider of public safety software and training. We are an international leader in public safety training and technology with products geared toward providing tools to help responders stay safe and educated. For those of you who are new to our podcast, we offer these podcasts with a variety of guests geared toward public safety topics, as well as monthly webinars. Today, we are welcoming to our show Doug and Jill Showalter. I won't ruin all of their story, but he and his wife Jill started their own business venture, Showalter and Company, to offer a different take on training based on their decades of real-life experience. Doug and Jill, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having us.
Hi, welcome. How are you?
Great. Before I jump into your training and your unique training techniques, can you share some of your background with us?
Yeah, sure. Hey, I did 30 years with the California Highway Patrol, and the California Highway Patrol, you should know, has 26 communication centers up and down the state of California. I worked in 10 of those and in various roles, a trainer, supervisor, all kinds of stuff. And then our agency is really unique because if you get hired with the Highway Patrol, no matter where in the state of California, you are immediately sent up to our academy for 3 luxurious weeks up there to learn. And I was actually asked to take over that whole thing, rewrite all of our policies, training manuals, the way we do training and hiring, all that stuff. So I did all that several years. Then I left there, went back to San Luis Obispo, where I finished my career after 30 years. And now I live in the beautiful state of Tennessee. And I've been training around the country for about 17 or 18 years, something like that. So,
okay.
All over the place.
What about you, Jill?
I'll give you the quick Cliff Notes version.
Sorry, mine's kind of long. But
I actually studied law, and I was a paralegal in Maryland. And a friend of mine worked in 911, and she said, you should come work with me. And I had wanted to go back to school to study business law. And I was like, oh, this might be an opportunity to be able to work midnights and go to school during the day. Well, 10 years later, I was still there. And I left 911 at 10 years to move to California when we got married. And then we started our business. And now I work for a bank for the last 7 years.
But she's really the whole backside of Showalter and Company. She does all the scheduling, all the billing, all the talking to everybody. All I do is show up. So
yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just going to digress a little bit. There's probably people who don't know your story. Now, California's here, Maryland's here. You want to share a little bit just so people know, how did that happen?
So I was working for Anne Arundel County Police in Maryland, and an opportunity came up for go to a conference in Vegas. I mean, and I figured if I could get 2 other people to go with me, 3 nights, we could split a hotel room, make it worth it. Well, while I was there, I met him, and he was filming some 66 questions in 60 seconds videos, and he asked me if I wanted to film some questions, and I said sure. And then we just kind of went from there. And then after about 2.5 years of dating long distance, we decided that I'd move to California because he was closer to retirement. And the whole plan was once he retired, we moved back east. And then we landed in
And not only that, I lived on the beach. And so I told her, you can still live in Maryland or you can live on the beach with me in California. What do you want to do? Not a hard decision.
and now you're in landlocked Tennessee, but I'm sure that's a whole nother story.
But neither one, it doesn't matter. Like, everybody's like, you don't miss seeing the beach every day. No, I don't. Like, I'm so happy to be east of the Mississippi that the beach was irrelevant.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I do have our very first encounter on video. She was walking by the booth I was working at. I said, hey, we're shooting these 6 questions, 60 seconds real fast. She said, okay, let's do it. So my friend Leslie was filming us. And we filmed the thing. So the very first time I met her was on film. So.
And Leslie's a really good friend of ours. Yeah. So we always.
Well, when she found out we were. Can say that.
A lot of people, they're very envious of that, going, I can't believe the very first time you ever saw her was on video.
Yeah. We tell Leslie it's her fault. She held the camera.
That's right. She did. So.
That's sweet. So Showalter and Company, you guys, you came to this agreement that this was something you were going to do. You and I talked about the differences in generational learning, and I laugh. I laughed when we talked, and I have chuckled the last couple of days because personally, I learned a lot of basic skills watching Schoolhouse Rock.
We all did. We all did.
Yeah, I'm just a bill, and a noun is a person, place, or thing. I mean, I can't
Conjunction,
tell you how many
junction.
times.
So they're all there. And like we talked about earlier, I said that, that's the way I'm approaching training is when because I'm a baby boomer, that usually it was after dinner, we cleared the table, mom and dad's still there. We did our ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, and cursive writing, which nobody does anymore, but we did all that stuff. Well, then you move forward generations, and both parents probably had to work. So your kids are probably not having both parents sitting there. So Sesame Street is training those kids. Conjunction Junction is training those kids. And it's teaching these younger people learning is fun, and fun is learning. And then they get to a workplace, and work's not fun. Learning's not fun at that point. And that's why I said we have to capture that way to make training a good experience and not something you have to go through. And that drives me crazy when I hear it, because I ask people sometimes, what's the worst training experience? And my God, they talk about all these terrible things. And I'm like, this is insane. We should never be doing like this. So you'd never be successful in business. Never. In the real world out there. That's why I do so much research in the private sector to see what the heck is working out there and how can I bring it into us.
But that's so when we talk about the fun places to learn and the songs that stuck. I mean, I am the age I am, and I was pre 10 years old learning Conjunction Junction,
Sure.
and I could still sing that song. Is there an out of the box training like that PSAPs can use that can make training fun?
Yeah, let me give you just one example of many, and this is because I had such a great trainer, Sandy, way back in the day when I first got hired, and I took a lot of stuff from her. So me and her were training on Graveyard in LA, and so I was pretty new, and we were working one day, and we had roll call every night where they do it, all the roll call, like 50 people in the roll call. And so I saw the supervisor come out and they said, okay, hey, Doug, Sandy called in sick today, so you're going to be sitting with this other person that everybody in the place knew was a very disgruntled lady. I mean, just awful. So I'm like, oh my gosh. So I go out on the floor with her and she says, hey, what have you guys been going over? And I said, well, Sandy just started talking about the NCIC book, because back then the book was printed. It wasn't online or all that stuff today. So she said, well, then go get the book. And I'm like, okay. So I go get the NCIC book, and it's huge. I set it down in front of me, and she goes, all right, just start going through it. And that was the last thing I heard from her the rest of the shift. She didn't talk to me. She didn't do nothing with me. So next day I'm in roll call. Sandy shows up, and I'm like, I told her, Sandy, don't ever call in sick again. And so she's like, what happened? I told her, and she's like, okay. We go out on the floor, and she goes, Doug, go get the NCIC book. And I said, really? We're going to do this again now? Oh my God. So I go get the book, and she goes, all right, look, this book is loaded with codes and ways to enter stuff into stolen vehicles and all kinds of things. I want you to find the 4-digit code for a Peterbilt tractor. It's in here. You just got to look for it. I want you to look real hard to see if you can find it. So I'm like, really? And she goes, get ready. I want you to as fast as you possibly can. And I'm like, all right. So she goes, go. And I'm like looking through it. And she goes, now while you're looking, I want you to tell me the code for the state of like Maryland or whatever it was. And I'm like, oh my God, she made that exact same exercise fun. I wanted to do it all night long. I'm like, what else? What do you mean tech now? And she's like, no. We're going to do something else now. But she understood how to engage me into something I want to learn, as opposed to just throwing a book at me and saying, good luck. And that to me is it really is the epitome of how I offer training, is I tell people it has to be something we want to do. And that's why our whole thing is called Training for Success, because the CTO should only focus on one thing: success. And when I do the class, I always have them within the first 5 minutes of the class write the word success across the top of their paper. And that's the only thing I want you to focus on, because your entire role is to make that person successful, because that's what you've been given that task to do. Now, here's the problem. Agencies don't provide the tools and the ways to do this stuff. They just say, you're a trainer today, go train. Hey, you need to know how to do this stuff and how to modify your training to make somebody learn, because we all can tell when you're talking to somebody and they're not listening anymore, where you can just kind of see their face kind of glaze over like, Right. We don't want training like that. We want training to where people are learning while they're excited about learning. I want to learn this job. I want to know all these things. And that's what we have to do with training. I've just seen it go the other way too long. And it drives me crazy to see it. And I hear people say it all the time. We can't keep anybody. Everybody quits during training. Have you looked deep into why that's the case? I mean, is it what we're doing? Because I always tell people, look here first. Look at you. What did you do wrong? Because I watched a podcast of John Tapper, the guy from Bar Rescue. He doesn't yell like on TV where he's like, shut it down. And in real life, he doesn't do that. But he's got great business insights. And he says, in order for a business to be successful, they have to own their failures. So if we say, hey, we can't get people through training, let's own that and say, what are we doing wrong? And let's change. Let's modify the way we're doing things instead of saying, well, we've always done it this way. Well, it doesn't work like that. So that's why I really do approach training in all my classes a lot differently than most. And some people get it and some people resist it. So
yeah, Jill, when you were in the PSAP, how was your turnover rate with people in training? And the reason I ask that is because I always used to think, we have a really low turnover rate once we get them out of training. But now that I'm not in the PSAP and it doesn't matter because I can't fix it, I can look at it and I say, if only I had recognized that, the problem is within and maybe we could have tweaked that training program. And how many people did we lose that we didn't need to lose?
Yeah.
So before I met him, I became a CTO of my own agency. And I became a CTO because I realized that I couldn't fix the new hires without becoming a part of the solution. So I went through CTO after years of them wanting me to do it. I finally was at a place where I understand the job enough to be able to explain it to somebody else and be responsible for myself and somebody else at the same time. So that was about 6 years in. And I never left my agency until I went to that first conference. So I didn't know what other agencies were like. I didn't know what turnover was like, but it was probably about normal compared to other agencies. It's probably about normal, but I would say that all the trainings I had made it through me. None of them washed out at me. Most of them made it onto the dispatch phase, and all but one of them made it through dispatch training. So that was my goal, was to, their first day with me, it was, here's my expectations of you. If I'm not meeting your expectations, it's your job to say something. If you don't understand what I'm saying or you don't like what I'm doing, it's your job to, because we had weekly meetings, I think, at that point, and monthly meetings, or I don't remember. It's been a while now. It's been 10 years, but we had meetings. So they had an opportunity to sit with the supervisor and say, hey, and not one of them did that. So I always was very upfront with them. I always was like, here's the calls you did well. Here's the calls we need to work on. So I was just very upfront. I never demeaned them. I never said, oh, you're an idiot. Why couldn't you get that right? It was, here's how we can do it better. Hey, you did this call really, really well. Well, this call is similar to that, and you would have handled that this similar way. It's not, once you realize that a lot of the calls are the same progression of how to handle them, it makes it easier to understand the job. So I tried to push the ones they did well on the ones that became harder. So.
And so when you met Doug, were you still a CTO?
I'm sorry?
When you met
were
Doug?
you still a CTO?
Yes, I was. Yes, I met him about 8 years into my career.
Yeah, what's funny is I went to do a keynote address in Maryland for a big conference, and I did not know who she was. And I did the conference and talked to a lot of people and did that stuff and left. Never knew even she was there up until much later. She said, you remember that thing you were at? I was there. I'm like, no way. I'm like,
that was actually the very first conference I ever attended, but it was an in-state conference because I had gotten into training. So I wanted to learn more about, you have the APCO conferences, you have the mid-state APCO conference. You have all these little local conferences. So I started going to those to learn more about training and to learn more about 911, because here I was trying to teach somebody, but I don't fully understand it myself. So I figured if I started going to conferences and I didn't realize I'd meet people. I had no idea what I was doing. I just was showed up and was like, oh, let's hold on and see what happens. And I'm so glad I did. I took that as opportunities to go to the trainings and go to the conferences to learn. I learned so much at conferences, and I met a husband, but so
I think that's the fun thing, because I've been to a lot of keynote addresses myself where you leave there thinking, I have no idea what this person's talking about.
So I do remember during that keynote or that class he put on at the very first conference I went to, I remember looking around the room going, this man has the attention of 150 people in this room, and dispatchers are very like ADHD, like nobody's paying attention for long. But like after about 30-40 minutes, people start getting up, moving around, getting fidgety. Like nobody was doing that. And I remember going, what in the world? Like I was just amazed that nobody was just up fidgeting around. People weren't talking. They were all just focused on what he was saying because it was engaging. Like it was truly a very engaging whatever he was doing at that point. I don't remember. It's been so long now.
I remember.
But it was just a very engaging what he was talking about. He's just fun. You could tell how much he loved his job and how much he really wanted to make everybody better that was in that room. So
I think that's what got me going on this thing was the fact that I do love what I did for 30 years and I wish I could still do it to this day. It's such a good job, and I hate it when I hear people down talk it, saying, it's dispatch so dark and there, I hate it. I'm like, you spent most of your life there. Do you really want to hate a job you just don't want to ever go to? I mean, go somewhere else, for God's sakes. It's like, if you're going to stay here, man, be part of the solution. Say, man, this is great.
I miss being in 911. I absolutely miss it. And if I could go back into a comm center, I'd probably do it in a heartbeat. But I also realize that the demands of a comm center don't meet the demands of our business. Like I wouldn't be able to take off and travel as much as I do. So it's not fair. So I'm still working in a sense in 911. I'm just on the back end teaching people. So
and the side note is she only goes when I go to cool places. Then she's like, oh, I'll go to that one. I'll go to that one too. But if I'm going someplace where it's like not as, a lot of the good things going on there, she'll be like, you can go by yourself.
I mean, isn't that the joy of owning a business? You get to do what you want.
That's right. That's right.
So yeah, I do miss it a lot, and but I enjoy conferences and seeing people and talking to people and still being in touch with what's going on. So because I really believe it's a very important job, and I believe that it's more than a job, it's a career. And that's when my trainees would come in, I would tell them, this is a career. This isn't a job. This isn't something you're doing for Christmas for extra money. This isn't something that you're doing. I mean, it truly is not. Like, you putting in too much time, energy, everything for it to be I'm going to work here for 6 months to get through Christmas. So
you've talked about some interesting techniques that you can do or to the concept. What techniques can a PSAP leader put into their training toolbox to help their members, really, without giving out all of your secrets, to help their members learn? Enjoy learning.
Sure. No, and I'll tell you, one of the biggest things that I do teach about is writing DORs, because there's a way to write a DOR that's a motivational tool. Meaning I'm going to read it and I want to come back to work tomorrow because I know what I'm going to do. It's when you read these DORs that are just littered with the F word, and I don't mean that word, I mean the F word fail, where somebody will write you failed at this, you failed at that. What kind of motivational tool is that for me to come back tomorrow? None. Right. I have no desire to come back on that kind of thing. And it's something we should be thinking about, like, what are we writing? And so when I teach that class, I talk about writing in a manner that, one, is understandable to everybody. And I do a couple of exercises to show everybody how that works. But it should be understandable, and it should have a goal. Every single day should end with a goal. It should end with, today we had difficulty with geography. Tomorrow we're going to go over that again. So the next DOR says, today our goal was to go over geography. We spent the first 5 minutes going and talking about this. That makes every DOR coming right after the next. It goes to the next one, then the next one, then the next one. Then the trainee knows when they leave work that day, they know what they're going to do tomorrow. And so I will ask a trainee individually when they're getting ready to leave, what's your goal for tomorrow? If they don't know their goal, I know communication is broke down between the two people, and I've got to work on that. So that's why these things are all in place for a reason. When I do this stuff, there's always a back reason why we're doing this, because I can tell whether communication's happening or it's not. And if I start asking them what's their goal and they can't tell me, I know the goals, it's not been talked about, and it has to be talked about. So they know, hey, we've had some bumps today. Okay, we made some mistakes. Who doesn't? Tomorrow we're going to fix them, and tomorrow we're going to go over that stuff. It makes it very simple to do that stuff. I did a video one time talking about try to avoid the F word. And when it starts out, everybody's like, oh, wow, holy cow. And I'm like, no, it's the word fail, because I've been written up in my career for doing some dumb things in the past. And when they write the word fail, that's all I see. And I think to myself, all right, you want to play? Now we're going to play. It's going to fail. All right. And it's like, there's no motivation to say, I want you to be back on track. I don't want you to go off the rails over here. I want you to do this. What's the motivational tool telling somebody you're a failure? There is none.
Right.
So yeah, that's a good one. And there's, I mean, I do so many in classes. I talk about all kinds of things to provide, whether it's my training class or my doing time in dispatch. I talk about these things that are simple little things, but man, they make a difference. I mean, they just, I'll give you an example. Here's one that I do talk about. I've taught it for years, so it's, people all pretty know it. I always tell people the most important part of training starts day one, hour one, minute one. The minute somebody walks through that door the very first time, they better feel like, I'm so glad I left Starbucks or I left Walmart or whatever. Instead of walking in going, oh dear God, I need to go back to Walmart. That's like, so I said, we need to kind of come up with a way to make them people feel really welcome. So Jill likes to make cupcakes. I mean, obviously. So she makes this tray of cupcakes. It has little flags on it that say, welcome to the Highway Patrol, you're 911, all this stuff. We put up big signs all over our comm center. Welcome to the Highway Patrol. Welcome to these things. Because I'll get there at 6 a.m. They come in at 8. So I got like a 2-hour span where I can go decorate this stuff. The only side effect was we would have a lot of officers hanging out in dispatch and going, can I have a cupcake? No, not yet. Get a hold, man. So when that person rolls in at 8, you can just see their face like, oh my God, is this for me? It's like, yeah, we're glad you're here, man. We're glad that you're part of this thing. When they walk through, all the officers standing there going, can we get a cupcake? So,
That's funny.
But in taking a picture of that new person next to that sign, guess what that means I've got in their personnel jacket that lasts forever? I've got their first minute, their first hour, their first day they walked into that dispatch center. I've got it on film. I've got it. And it's like, it's such a powerful tool to get people to say, remember the day? Remember when you started? I do. I've got those days. And it's just a simple thing to kind of remind people, because when I'm doing classes, I'm always reminding people, hey, how long did it take you to get hired? Do you remember when you submitted your application? Do you remember when you went for your interview? Too many people forget that because they're so hung up on the minutia of, I don't like this person doesn't go to lunch with me, I don't like this person, the supervisor mean to me. And it's like, you're so caught up in this stuff. I try to remind people, wait. There is some good stuff about this job, and you should know that going in. So yeah, that's a good one.
All right. So that's an easy, inexpensive, no funds needed.
Yeah.
Fix. When agencies are looking for training and funds are low, what kind of things would you suggest they do? So that's an internal thing that they can do. Yeah. What about for their people, if they need, for training for their people?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking like I'll go to recruitment for a second here. So I'm a big, huge recruit person. I used to do it all the time. We'd be on the news and on the radio and all this other junk. And my captain they were doing coffee with a cop. And I'm like, Jesus, can we do something with a dispatcher? Because we have enough cops. I'm like, and so he was like, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to do Danish with a dispatcher, because we can get the message out to the community that we're hiring. Here's what we're hiring for. Here's what we're hiring of. And I think it'll work. And he was kind of like, it'll never work. It'll never be good. And I'm like, let me just try it. So I called Starbucks and said, can we come over there, do this little presentation thing over there with people? And they were like, oh, absolutely. Come over. We'll give you the coffee. We'll give you the coffee cake, all this thing. And I'm like, oh, great. So we brought some dispatchers with us. We went out there. We met so many people. And it was, to me, I could see it in the dispatchers to say, look at how many people want my job. Look at how many people are so excited about this job. And they want to hear all about it. Like, tell me more about this job. And it's like, that kind of gets everybody of the same mindset of, don't be so down on this job. It's a great job to have, man. You should be like thinking, how can I make it better? Just these simple little things. And I know people around the country have been doing this dispatch, Danish with a dispatcher thing. And that's great. It's just, I saw one place do it and I thought, maybe not the best idea. They were doing drinking with a dispatcher. I thought, no. Not sure that's a good idea or not. But these are on, and again, everything I talk about in classes costs nothing. It costs nothing to do that stuff. It's like, it's just, but it gets everybody in the right mindset, because too many people have been basically programmed to see negative things. It's too hot. It's too cold. It's too bright. It's too dark. I don't like this person. I don't like that person. All these things. And they just get so focused on it, but nobody's trying to turn them to say, wait a minute, look at how cool our job is. So it's just simple stuff like that. And CTOs are the key to this entire thing. So if an agency believes they are, then they need to give them the right tools and the right ways to do things and keep in touch with these people and talk to them about training and all these things. They need to kind of keep it up, because if you don't, then you don't know what that CTO is doing. I'll give you another one. I always ask people, what's the mission statement of your department? People look at me with that blank look of, it says something about,
right.
And I'm like, if you're a CTO, you should know that, because you can use that every single day. You print that out, you sit it in front of you when you're answering calls. If the call didn't go too well, you ask them, did we live up to this core values? Did we live up to these things? And then people are like, oh, I didn't think about using that. I know, it costs nothing. Just a piece of paper.
I know when I was a CTO, I trained on midnights. And so it was some long, long nights on midnights that we did a lot of nothing. So when I became a CTO, I made sure that we're constantly doing something, like whether it was reviewing calls or going over manuals or what have you. Well, I like to do crafts, and I'm craftsy, and I do, aside from baking, I also do random crafts. So I made a memory game.
Still.
With like our nature codes for incidents and different things that they could match together. And we would play that in lieu of sitting there reading stuff or just talking. It would like a little bit more interaction. It made it a little bit more fun. And then we had also gotten in a board game that one of the public safety conference people had put out. I don't know if I can say their name, but they put out Monopoly, basically. So I had my agency buy Monopoly, and we played Monopoly, and we had questions. And in order for the trainee to be able to move around the board, they had to answer the questions correctly. So yeah, so we were learning and also having fun, because those nights on midnights, especially during the winter, got long, and I didn't want them to be like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, we're just wasting away at night. Like, I didn't want them to be like, this is what it's all about. So I did try to make it fun. Like, that was nothing my agency had done. That was me going, let me see what I can do to make this more fun and engaging. And then there was times when, if it was just one of those, like, you're just at your limit, like day 6, like we worked 6 on 3 off. Day 6, you got 8 hours left, and you're like, sometimes we would just play cards. Like, sometimes you just need that mental break, just for people to come back fresh. Like, because some people just, training, you can only get so much training before you're just like, there's nothing else going in that bank today.
Right.
So I think it's also on the trainer to recognize that sometimes you just need to, like, the training, it's a day just off. Like, let's have some fun. Let's do something fun, but we're still working. So I did try to make that part of my training when I was a CTO. I was just trying to make it fun and recognizing that the CTO was at max capacity, because it does happen.
Yeah.
And we've all been there when you're like, I literally just can't take anymore. So I did try to recognize that and make it humanize them.
There's always ways to do stuff. Every time I heard somebody say, Doug, I don't know what to do. I got all day. I don't even know what to do at this point. I'm like, there's always ways to do things. I went out and sat with somebody right before I left, and I was getting ready to retire. I went out there and sat with somebody, and she was having trouble focusing, because she would listen to what's going on in the room. Like, oh my God, did you hear what's going over there? Did you hear what they're doing over there? And so I said, you really got to focus. So I told her trainer, go sit somewhere else. I'm going to sit with your training for a minute. So I'm sitting with her, and I'm like, okay, so I want you to, and we had her doing some little quiz thing, but as she's doing it, believe it or not, I'm singing the song from, what's that guy with the mask, the opera thing?
Oh, Phantom of the Opera.
Phantom of the Opera. Oh. So I'm sitting behind her like, slowly, gently. And she's just like, will you stop doing that? I'm like, you got to push that away and listen and focus right on. And she was like, oh my God. So I did it a bunch of times. And after that, she was like, it really did teach me. I cannot listen to this because I'm doing this. And I'm like, I said, there's got to be ways to make it an enjoyable thing. Yeah. People in the room were going, are you really singing over there, Doug? I'm like,
yeah. And I would also, like, if I realized the trainee was becoming max capacity, I would just have them sit back and just listen to me. Yeah. Let me practice what I preach. So they realize that I'm not just talking. This is actually how I do my job, because they, like, back then they sat and listened to you for probably about the first week, and then they started typing and listening. And then, there'd probably be about, 2-month span where you weren't really doing anything as the trainer. You were just listening to your trainee. So for me, it would get boring. So I would just, like, sometimes just, hey, I'll take the next few calls. And that way they could also realize that I'm practicing what I preach.
Yeah.
If I'm telling you to do something a certain way, this is me doing it naturally. This isn't me doing it because I'm telling you to do it this way. This is how I handle calls. This is how I do it. So.
But that's why supervisors, managers, leaders, whoever have got to be involved with training so they can see, hey, that training is having some difficulty today, focusing or doing whatever. Let's figure out how to do something else for them. Let's give them something to other task or something. So, because I was so involved in training, every center I worked at, I mean, my captain at the last place I worked was like, Doug, are you a psychologist or something? Every time I come by your office, somebody's sitting in there. I'm like, because they want to tell me what's going on. They'll come in and talk. I'll talk about training with them and then send them back out, bring them in together. We talk about all kinds of stuff so I can make sure that we're all heading in the same direction. We're all going in the right direction out there. I don't want anybody to take a left turn. We need to go straight to this thing out there. So,
as a matter of fact, I actually had a trainee, and when the supervisor would jump on the phone, because they would just drop in and listen randomly, she could never tell if it was me or my trainee because my trainee talked just like I did.
Oh God, really?
Like the same mannerisms in the same way I said stuff. She's like, I could never. I'd have to stand up to look to see which one of y'all were talking.
I'm scared.
Tell. I was like, I guess that makes me a really good trainer, doesn't it?
You're making Stepford wives, man.
I have to say, Doug, you're singing. I've heard a dispatcher, a trainer, he used to stand behind his trainee and he was trying to get them to move faster and he'd go like this.
Oh God, really? No, I don't do that.
Oh, that's way more stressful than the singing.
Yeah. I try to keep it fun because I know how hard training is. I got hired with 12 people at the same time in LA. I was the last person to be released out of training. And I kept telling Sandy, oh my God, I'm an idiot. I don't know what's going on. Everybody's released. She goes, Doug, some people train really thoroughly and some people just train over the top, just basically give you the basics.
Yeah.
She goes, I will train you so many things. You'll know so much more than everybody else. And I'm like, I don't believe you. I don't believe you. And when I got released, people were coming to me all the time going, hey, how do you do this? And I'm like, oh, you do it like this. Because she spent the time to not only make training fun, but so informative that it was like, man, I knew so much stuff going out of training. And that's the way I always trained after that. I wanted everybody to be in that same, here's how I did it. And here's how I learned it really good because I'm just kind of a learner person. And I want to make it an enjoyable experience. So when you get out of training, you're like, it wasn't crazy. We had a good time training, but I learned so damn much.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I've always put this thing of you've got to know when it's appropriate to do maybe that singing thing. Or the wave or whatever I've done in the past out there in the rooms. You have to know when it's appropriate to do that. You can't just do it in the middle, like, all right, let's do that. You can't do that.
Yeah.
What happens though when someone comes out of training and they didn't have that experience?
Yeah.
How would you recommend that these people invest in themselves?
That's 100% why I got into being a CTO, because people would come out of training and they didn't know what they were doing. And you're like, you just spent 6 months with a trainer, but then you look back at the trainer and you're like, okay.
No, see, I don't blame the CTOs.
That's what was frustrating to me.
I blame the management because they have to be in charge of these people and tell them, this is how we do things. This is what I expect of you. And that's why there should be these conversations between management and the CTO. These are my expectations of what you're doing. And if I don't tell you my expectations, guess what? You can live up to them because there are none. It's like, we can't have that kind of stuff. I mean, I always tell people, and this is, I really hate to date myself, but I mean, this is even going to, she doesn't even know this stuff, but it's like, I always tell people those glass Coke bottles back in the day had imprinted on the bottom, no deposit, no return. Now I look at it as, what deposits am I making in my career that are going to give me a great return? I mean, how do you think I got that job at the academy in charge of the whole statewide training program? Because people knew this guy knows stuff and we get to get him up here. So I tell people, invest in yourself, man. It's the best investment you'll ever make. Whether it's listening to a podcast, going to a class, reading a book, doing whatever it is, it's investing in you and it's making you the best trainer you can be out there. Because I learned so much from podcasts and YouTube and books and stuff like that of unique things that I'm going, that might work in our world. I could probably get that to work in our place. And it's like, then when you go to work, management should be listening to people like that say, how about if we try this? Because too many times people feel like they're not going to do anything for me. If I say they're not going to do it, I hear that all the time. And I'm like, people, you've got to go back and just be polite, be friendly, be professional and say, listen, boss, I saw this thing. Maybe we should try it. Let's see what happens. And if you see it work to fruition and it works, then everybody wins. I mean, everybody's a good thing out there. So to me, it's just so, it starts at the top and goes down. And you have to, people put so much heat on CTOs. Well, they didn't train right. They didn't do it. What do we have the systems in place to make them understand what's successful? Do we have those systems in place? Do we have policies that are current and provide some knowledge? How many times have I been, okay, like there are major 911 training companies, don't say it, organizations, let's say, that have been out to teach CTO classes. And then about 2 months later, guess who they're bringing in? Me. And I'm like, why am I here? You guys just had this national organization come here and do a class with you guys. And they said, yeah, well, they taught us the stuff about it, but they didn't teach us how to do it. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay, so let's do it that way then. So, because I don't know your policies, nor do I need to know them, but I need to know how you know them. How can you reflect on those? How can you use that and say, I can take this policy or whatever, and I can explain it to my trainee because it means this. I don't know all your policies. I know my policies that I wrote, but it's like, I mean, I want people to understand trainers need to have that support system in place to give them the skills to be a good trainer. Because when I hear people say, oh my God, that CTO is horrible. Has anybody sat them down? Has anybody told them how to train? My guess, no. So,
and you had asked, I think, your original question that led him on this
45 minutes ago.
Was if it's a trainee who's having problems who's just released, what can they do?
Right. How do you recommend that people invest?
So I am just getting ready to pick up a trainee at my current job on Friday. And I have an employee now, and we tell people to use your voice. Like, use your voice. Don't be afraid to say something, because ultimately it's your job. Like, ultimately, I'm not paying your paycheck. It's the county. If you don't think you're getting a fair shake, or you don't understand something, or there's something going on, use your voice. Sitting back doing nothing is not going to help. So, and
see, that's where the DORs are essential. If it doesn't say they're doing these things, how in the world is that person knowing that they're not getting the training they need? I mean, I don't know.
If you don't understand something, instead of saying, oh, oops, just say, I don't understand this. Can you help me with this? Can you help me understand this? Can you help me figure this out? Like, sometimes just voicing your concern or just using your voice can get you a lot further than doing nothing and saying, well, they never taught me. No, that's not going to get you anywhere. That's not going to get you anywhere in a court of law. So, you go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but even people who get out of training, they might find themselves just, for the first 11 years of my career, I never had training again.
Oh, yeah.
So I
worked for the state, for God's sakes. There is no training.
I love that there's so much free training out there.
Yeah.
And so this is a little bit of a deviation. Shocking.
Hold on, everybody. We're making a left.
So about a year ago, a coworker of mine had asked us to speak to her neighbor who was applying to be a 911 dispatcher. And she's like, hey, can you just give her some tips and tricks and just kind of talk to her and answer some of her questions? She's going in for an interview. So we get her on the phone and we're talking to her, and she's very well spoken. So I'm like, well, you're good there. So we're like recommending different podcasts to her, recommending different, go to these different types of resources. She'd done them all on her own.
Huh?
So we had told her, hey, when you go into your interview, making sure you tell them that you're doing these things. Don't be ashamed. Don't be like embarrassed that you're doing it. Like, go in and say, hey, I've listened to these podcasts. This is what I've learned. And they're free resources out there for people to have and listen to and ask questions to. And a lot of the free resources out there give you resources to the people directly that you can send emails and ask for resources and ask questions to. So a trainee can go find these things. It's not hard. They're out there. And if your agency is not going to give it to you, take it upon yourself to seek it out.
Yeah. That's like the podcast we're on right now.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, people can download this thing and listen to it and do whatever. And it's like, there's so many other things out there that somebody, and I was kind of like you. I mean, my first year, I was really kind of like, yikes, I hope I don't get this kind of call or that kind of call. Oh my God, it's scary. I mean, after that, then I was like pretty cocky about it, but it's one of those things where it's like, you just got to kind of get through that uncomfortable phase. But I'll tell you what, I felt like I could probably figure out most things because Sandy had built that in me to say, here's how you get a problem solve this stuff. And that's why when I train, I say now, I don't really train that. But when I was training dispatchers, I would always tell them the way I can tell you're doing really good is if you make a mistake and you can recover out of it. If you can do it yourself and recover out, then I know you've got the foundation to help yourself get out of this thing. So that's a big step for me. I mean, when somebody can do that, they got it.
That's a really good point. Recovery from a mistake. Because how many times did you both see in your career somebody make a mistake and they just tank for the day?
Oh yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
I would tell my trainees, if you make a mistake, own it, because chances are we can fix it, or we can either. So there was many times in my career where I put something in, or I did something, I was like, I'm not sure or I didn't know how to do it, and I'd go up to a supervisor, I'm like, well, I don't know how to do it, or I did it, here's how I did it. Is that correct, or should we fix it? So you have to own what you're doing. Yeah. You can't just try to cover it up, because it's all recorded. It's going to get found out regardless. So I always made that point. And even in my job now, like I make mistakes, but I own them and we fix them. And that's what I try to tell my trainees. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to fail, but own it. We can fix it.
Right. And when you're talking about investing in themselves, when you own it, part of fixing it is like, okay, how can I do that better?
Oh yeah. I mean, I have learned so much from listening to podcasts and YouTube and reading books that have nothing to do with dispatch.
Yeah.
But I've learned so much from them, thinking this is the mindset we should be having in our world, because too many times we're stuck on we've always done it this way, or this is what it always has been. I had to fight in my own agency. For years, I was like telling them, we can't keep doing this stuff, people. We can't. And they're just like, well, it's just easier to do. And I'm like, come on, man. I'm like, our attrition rate was bad. We were losing people. And I'm like, it all comes back to the training. It all comes back to management, supervisor, paying attention and saying, I have to provide my CTOs with a firm foundation of learning so they can pass it on to somebody else. And to me, it's just, when I hear somebody they don't take personal responsibility, I always tell people about this thing called the Titanic philosophy. The Titanic philosophy is, I'm going down, I'm taking all y'all with me. So like, and I hate when people do that, because I've made mistakes in my career. My God, if you could see my personnel jacket, you'd be like, whoa, I made some mistakes. But it's one of those things where I didn't say, well, everybody else did. I said, hey, you know what? That was my fault. I screwed that thing up, and that was my fault. That was stupid on my part. So, we got that kind of stuff. And agencies have to just kind of like, I sometimes feel that the communication within an agency is so critical, but it's so misunderstood. You don't have like supervisors realizing that they have such really good abilities to empower somebody, to make them inspired, to give them motivation, to do all these things. Too many times supervisors want to sit in the office and go, well, I'm busy doing paperwork. You don't think I was? I'm in charge of the whole state damn program. It's like, I mean, you have to make the time for this stuff. And you have to, in order to make our whole training program successful, everybody has to be doing something different. We just have to. I know it sounds awful.
And I like how you guys have talked about, I mean, one of my questions early that I was thinking that I was going to ask and I didn't have to, and now for sure I don't have to, is why Showalter and Company, what did you do to prepare for it? But you've said you have watched podcasts, you have continued to grow and learn, which is exactly what you're telling the public safety world. Keep growing and learning, and if your agency isn't providing that, then do it yourself.
And my thing is, bring it back to the agency. Take it in there and say, hey, I researched this thing the other day, or listened to this podcast, or did whatever. And tell people about it. Don't be the only one with it. Tell everybody about it and say, this is something good that we can learn from. And every time I leave a class, whether it's any of the class we teach, I'm always telling people, share what you know. Share what you know, because the largest workforce in America right now is baby boomers like myself. Once we all retire, that's going to be a lot of people gone in leadership positions and all that stuff. Somebody's going to take over their role. Who is it going to be? Who's preparing themselves today to take those roles that are coming up real soon?
Yeah.
And it's like, I always try to tell people, you got to take if your agency doesn't give you the training, go get it, go find it.
And my thing is, the worst thing they can do is tell you no. What are they, if you ask to do something, all they can do is tell you no, or they can say, hey, you know what? Bring back a plan. Let's try it out. There's and like he talks about like the new people coming in the first day and having cupcakes. I've had agencies and have heard agencies say, hey, our department will let us do this. Well, they're not going to let you go make cupcakes at home and bring them in for somebody new. Like, that makes no sense to me. Like, you can take it on yourself. All it does is take one person, make some cupcakes. If it's going to be your CTO that's coming in, your trainee, why don't you make them cupcakes? It costs you maybe $2 at the grocery store to pick up brownie mix or cupcake mix. Right. So sometimes it just takes one person to start making a change.
It's the little things that make a lot of difference. So
yeah. So it's yeah.
Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed listening to you guys today, and
we would definitely appreciate you having us on here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any last tips you can give us before we say goodbye?
I just really, I would tell you that I try to tell people all the time, because like I talked about secondly with baby boomers, when people that have been on 30 years or more and are leaving the job, how do you capture that information that they're walking out the door with? And I'm always telling people, you got to talk to these people and see what they've got. Talk to their experiences. I mean, sit a new person with the senior person, not to train, just to kind of talk to each other and see what's going on. Don't lose that experience. It's going to walk out that door and be gone. And we have to kind of capture that stuff. So that's my final thought.
And then he also teaches in his classes that you don't have to have all the answers. You have to know what your resources are.
Yeah.
So if you're a new person coming into the job, and this was me, I lived in the county I worked in for my entire life. So I went in going, oh my God, I got this. I know where this is. My mom lives here. Grandparents like different. I got into the job and was like, I don't know the county at all. Like what? Like what? This is part of the county. Like I didn't know the county, but I knew that dispatcher knew this area. This dispatcher knew that area. So if I had a question in those areas, I could go to those dispatchers. And then slowly over time, I learned myself, but I didn't know it all, but I knew where to find the answers. And it could be a person. It could be a book. And you don't always have to know it. It's just knowing where to find it.
Wow.
Right. Good. Good tips. Well,
you shouldn't have said any last thoughts, because we really rolled on that one.
I appreciate it. Thanks again for joining us.
Yeah,
I hope you both have a great day.
Thank you. We always enjoy Equiture, so thank you very much.
Yeah, Equiture. We love Equiture.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.